I remember Adam Back and Gavin Andresen kind of going head to head on some of the earliest Bitcoin podcasts that I listened to, because that was when what would become the Blocksize Wars really started brewing.
And that was in 2015, 2016?
Yeah, kind of, I would say 2014 to 2017 probably encompasses the Blocksize Wars. And a lot of the pattern matching that I had developed from managing and interfacing with engineers in Silicon Valley really ended up being useful when I was consuming that type of content. Because I remember hearing Adam Back and hearing Gavin Andresen. And for listeners who aren't as familiar, like Adam Back, legend, giant in this space, cryptography and Bitcoin, and founder of Blockstream.
He was mentioned in the white paper.
Yeah, cited in the white paper, as OG as you can be. And then Gavin Andresen was a software developer who kind of contributed very early on and took the reins, I suppose you could say, from Satoshi when Satoshi eventually faded away. But Gavin was really pushing for certain changes to be made to the protocol, specifically increasing the block size limit back then. And I remember thinking about this argument of like, should we increase the block size? Thinking about the Blocksize Wars. And there was this very appealing surface level narrative of, well, we want transactions to be fast and cheap, and so we need more bandwidth, and the way we get more bandwidth is you just crank this little number up. And it sounds very like, oh, well, yeah, that's a good thing, and that would do that thing, and so of course. And I think a lot of people, myself included early on, were kind of like, maybe that's a reasonable idea. That seems like solid engineering. Throughput is generally a desirable thing, so let's do it. And then on these podcasts, Adam Back had all of these nuanced reasons why there are so many trade-offs to consider that are not obvious.
Gosh, you got to watch all this happen. I absolutely love this. Sorry, continue. This is so exciting.
Yeah, and I loved, because in my experience of interfacing with so many different engineers in my career, I dealt with a lot of personalities, and some of them kind of had this aggressive personality of, I know everything and I'm God's gift to software. And, we should absolutely make this change. And I know it's going to be fine. And anybody who says otherwise, just doesn't know what they're talking about. And then on the other side, you have these people who are very conscious of risk and complexity and all of the trade-offs that you're making.
And Adam Back being one of these people.
And Adam Back struck me as that.
Yeah.
And, but what's funny. He has
the opposite of hubris.
Yeah, totally.
Dude, I love Adam Back.
Very humble.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm a big fan of all of his work and grateful for it. But I remember listening to these podcasts and I remember thinking to myself, man, I really agree with what this Adam guy is saying. There's so much more to it, and this might not be a good idea to change the block size. But then at the same time, I remember thinking, most people listening to this podcast aren't going to walk away with that same takeaway, because, Adam, like, engineers aren't necessarily as maybe, not well-spoken, but like the way that they deliver the message sometimes might not be as polished as people pushing the very simple narrative.
Yes.
Because the people pushing the very simple narrative get to focus all their time on creating this very simple narrative and talking about it. And
comes to mind.
Yeah, man.
Oh my gosh.
Marketing and messaging. Yeah. And then you have engineers who are doing this deep work to solve incredible problems and move research forward.
Yes.
And then they maybe they hop on a podcast and they haven't practiced delivery 1,000 times.
Right.
Like that. And I remember thinking, man, what if the world doesn't understand this? And it just got me really excited about trying to contribute to the ecosystem. And so, I've never contributed code to the Bitcoin project. That's way over my head and my capabilities.
Or running it on a laptop, or you were interfacing with the software, the protocol at that time?
I was running my own node, mining never really for like serious reasons, but just to kind of teach myself how that aspect of the system worked. But then I just tried to help evangelize my understanding of what was going on in the Blocksize Wars. And I remember I posted a Twitter thread in 2015 or 16 that was along the lines of confession. I used to be a big block supporter and kind of going into why I thought that was a good idea initially and why I later came to believe that was not a good idea and that the truth was more complex and deserved more thought than that.
And how did you personally come to that conclusion? Because it is alluring. It's like, okay, well, let's liberate humanity from the shackles of scarcity and censorship and debasement and all the things. And like, okay, so you would think at first glance that increasing the block size so that more people could move Bitcoin around on the main chain is a good thing. And then the idea of having Lightning or Blockstream or some company come in and offer solutions to that, like it could be concerning and easy to kind of fall into that big block trap.
Yep.
How did you navigate through that and come to the conclusion on your own that doing so wasn't maybe the best thing?
A lot of it started from looking at the arguments of the big block side. And there were folks like Mike Hearn. He was a developer who left Google to contribute to the Bitcoin project and then famously like flamed out and wrote a blog about why Bitcoin has no future 10 years ago. Rick Falkvinge and some of these names that I'm dusting the cobwebs off of. But I saw this narrative of core developers are evil and they're hijacking the Bitcoin project. And I thought, okay, well, maybe. Okay, let's go and figure that out. And so then I tried to interface with the core developers. I basically joined the IRC channels and the Slack channels that they hung out in. And I didn't want to like be some distraction, but I just observed and thought like, okay, well, what are they spending their time on? What are they thinking about? And reading some of their commentary in GitHub about proposed changes to Bitcoin, like Peter Wolla, who's prominent core developer for a long time, and it became apparent to me that wow, like they are hyper intelligent. Super glad that we have people like them working on Bitcoin to secure it for us and for the masses, and their intent seems good. They seem very measured and calculated about risk and less adversarial. And it seemed like the other side was just kind of trying to like taunt them or aggressively pull them into these forums and challenge them to debates. And if you're getting, invited to a fight, if you're getting invited into some format, the person inviting you is probably going to invite you to some format that they're well practiced in and that you're not, or that they have an upper hand in. And so it made me think more critically about who's involved and why. And I read something from Peter Wolla that really drove home the immutability of Bitcoin for me. And the idea that if the rules are hard to change, and if some of them are effectively impossible to change, such as the limit of the supply, 21 million Bitcoin max forever, then maybe that is actually a feature. And maybe if you make changes to other parts of the system, you are sacrificing or at least putting at risk this other feature, which is resistance to change of the core consensus rules.
And that's because more people can run a node effectively, or is that an incomplete or incorrect thought process?
It doesn't directly have to do with how many people can run a node. There's kind of no upper bound on that. Increasing the block size would introduce, it would just kind of increase a parameter that has been in the system for a long time. And it would kind of lead to this argument of, like slippery slope. We changed the block size limit, so why can't we change the 21 million supply limit? Maybe we can apply some of the reasoning as to why this important parameter needs to change. And we as a small group of policymakers can then apply questions to other parts of the system. So I think there's some element of slippery slope to it. Yeah. But then there are also just very valid technical considerations about latency, where if you increase the block size, then blocks are larger and they require more disk space and they require more network bandwidth to upload and to transmit around.
Okay, yeah.
And so then suddenly, if you are someone who doesn't have really fancy internet access and a really fast, beefy computer, then you could be kind of at this structural disadvantage in the system.
Right.
And you would risk sacrificing some of the decentralization. You would basically edge the smaller nodes, the people without as many resources, out of the system.
Yeah.
And if you follow that through, the more times that happens, the easier it gets to do, because you like remove some of these nodes from the edges that can't quite keep up. You effectively increase the minimum system requirements of the Bitcoin network. Yeah. And so that removes some small nodes, and then you go and you maybe do the same vote again in a couple of years. You try to make the same changes again. And then suddenly you take off the nodes that are then the smallest, and you just introduce this creeping type of centralization, where the biggest, most expensive nodes with the most connectivity and resources can almost like outvote or bump off of the network these smaller nodes. And that ethos of protect decentralization, ensure that even nodes without a lot of monetary resources are able to participate in the future of money, is something that I think it really sets Bitcoin apart, especially from all of the tens of thousands of other cryptocurrencies out there that are a little bit more move fast, break things, Silicon Valley, blah, blah, blah.
A Saylor quote comes, I forget when he said this, but he's like, just not change it. Yeah. Just don't change it.
Yeah.
And is this an accurate way to think about things? Because I've thought a bit about the block size and what it would take to run a full node if the block size increases. As computing power and things become more accessible, internet's faster, and hard drives get larger, it would be natural to think that you could increase the block size and not make it as challenging for more people to continue to, or as many people to continue to run the nodes.
Yep.
So in that sense, at the time, it was just a premature update or upgrade.
That's how I would characterize it.
Okay.
And one thing that I think is interesting there is that, yes, there is this theoretical path where it could make sense to increase certain parameters like the block size over time as infrastructure becomes more robust and affordable. But maybe we don't need to. Maybe through the ingenuity of software developers and layer 2 solutions like Lightning or like Arc and others, we will be able to accommodate transactional activity and commerce on Bitcoin's network in such a way that we don't even need to. Yeah. And so I really love that forcing function of don't change things too prematurely. Let a system have some constraints around it that brilliant engineers can feel and can kind of, puzzle themselves with and think about clever ways to build around. And who knows what kind of innovation will be unlocked. If we had just increased the block size, like if the block size had been YOLO increased in 2013 without any thought given to it, who knows if we ever would have had an incentive to think about systems like Lightning or layer 2 solutions and that model of scale in layers so that the base layer doesn't have to be changed out from under us too often or put at risk.
Yeah, when I think about, the whole altcoin movement, generally speaking, and I don't know if this is an accurate way to think about it, but I think like, okay, well, if there's a real use case for this stuff, wouldn't it be prudent to build it as a layer on top of Bitcoin? As Saylor says, the hardest substance in the known universe. So you have these protocols where, as far as I can tell, they're just unregistered securities, most of them which have pre-mined so they could skirt around SEC filing laws so they could fund their endeavors. And the incentive to do so seems so skewed. And if there's actually a real world use case or problem that they're solving, and if it's going to truly last, wouldn't you want it as a layer on top of Bitcoin?
Yep.
Yeah. And so you went through all of this. So did you find yourself succumbing to the siren call of any of these altcoins as you went through all of that?
I did. So, 2013 is when I started buying my first bit of Bitcoin, attending meetups, all of that. Of course, you do encounter all the other coins. And at first, the narratives seem very appealing. Prior to Bitcoin, I was a precious metals guy.
Yeah.
So I'm skeptical of government money printing. I was reading a lot of Austrian economics and Ayn Rand. And so I liked gold and silver, and I was like stacking silver bullion, in my closet at home.
I did a lot of that myself.
Yeah. Which for any wrench attackers, I don't do that anymore. There's
Same
nothing,
here.
nothing that Robert can take from my home. I'll say publicly.
Same here.
Yeah. But so that narrative of like, oh, maybe Litecoin is the silver to Bitcoin's gold. Yeah. Initially, I was like, I was a silver guy. Maybe I should be a Litecoin guy. Yeah. And so I definitely bought a bunch of others. At one point, I probably owned 20 or 30 different cryptocurrencies at one time. I owned XRP. It's just horrible to say.
I'll admit it. In like 2019, I bought some XRP, a couple $100 worth. Fortunately, I was strapped. I was all in on my cannabis farm at the time, so I didn't have a bunch of extra funds. Then when I sold the property, I was just like, I'm a very risk adverse individual, which might be ironic for somebody who spent 17 years producing cannabis and now has 100% of their money in Bitcoin. But the reason I have 100% of my money in Bitcoin is because I'm so risk adverse. And the value proposition of Bitcoin made perfect sense to me. But the rest of it all is quite confusing. It really is. And it's like Robert says there, it's like innovation theater, and at best, and there's scams at worst.
Yep. So much of it is performative. So much of it is smart people, or at least smart sounding people, with a slide deck and a story about why their coin is the hot new thing and it's going to change the world.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money, and be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.